everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Pick just about any social index: housing, healthcare, morbidity, economic development, wealth, education, and you will find that African Americans are near or at the bottom compared to other races. Systemic racism plays a key role in racial disparities, and according to one organization, working simultaneously across sectors is the only way to bridge the gap. Up next on Another View, Project 10X, a bold initiative to overcome America's race problem. Stay tuned. Another View will be right back after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started this afternoon, I would love to tell you about something that if you are a gardener, you really need to pay attention to, and that is that the Norfolk Extension Master Gardeners will offer a new 10-part online series focused on the fundamentals of gardening. Now, registration is open with classes. They start February 9th through April the 13th, and they are for Norfolk residents and City of Norfolk employees interested in learning about successful gardening. They're going to cover everything from vegetable gardening, pollinators, native plants, pruning, soils, pest management, and lawns. And there is a cost. You can find out more information by going to norfolkmastergardeners.org. That's norfolkmastergardeners.org. It's bold, it's audacious, it's focused, it's expensive. Is it doable? Project 10X is a 10-year, $1 billion with a B dollar initiative to overcome social inequality and inequity. Spearheading this initiative is the Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. Its president and CEO is no stranger to Hampton Roads. We're so honored to have with us today Maurice Jones, former president and publisher of the Virginian Pilot, former deputy secretary of HUD, former secretary of Commerce and Trade for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and who now heads LISC, one of the country's largest organizations supporting projects to revitalize communities and catalyze economic opportunity for residents. Maurice, you got such a resume. I had to get it in there. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to be with you.
It's good to have you. Absolutely. And also joining us is Blair Durham, co-founder and president of Black Brand, which stands for Business Research Analytics, Networking, and Development. They are the Black Chamber of Commerce in Hampton Roads. How you doing, Blair?
Hi, Barbara. Thanks so much for having me today.
Oh, I'm so excited to have both of you on the show. So last night, Maurice, I was telling a friend about the show and what we were going to be talking about and about this audacious $1 billion plan you've got. And she said, $1 billion sounds like a lot, but you could just use that on housing. Is it enough? So the question is it enough to accomplish the mission?
Not by itself. It's only a piece of what's needed to actually truly do the work that we aspire to do. But what we hope is that it will also invite others to embark on their $1 billion 10-year journey. And if we can actually get a sufficient number of these kinds of journeys, yes, we can make some pretty transformative changes. We tend, just so you know, we tend to leverage our dollars about $4 or $5 to one. So if we actually, once we actually succeed at this billion, we will actually leverage probably another $4 or $5 billion with our investments. So, what we need is several places, several organizations stepping up and saying, "Yep, I'm going to do my billion as well."
So, tell us what LISC is. Let's start there. And for those that may not be familiar with the organization, what do you do at LISC?
The easiest way of thinking about us is we're a development finance company. We deploy capital. We make loans, we make grants, we make equity investments. The difference is we're doing it to fight poverty. We're doing it to catalyze opportunity in underinvested and disinvested places. So we're using our capital to fight for folks who have been historically underinvested in, disinvested in, discriminated against. That's what LISC does. And we have over 40 years invested about $22 billion. And to the point of leverage, that $22 billion has actually leveraged in total about $65 billion. And it's in largely communities of color and low wealth communities and rural communities. That's what LISC does for a living, if you will.
So I want to talk about Project 10X in particular. But before we do that, I want to bring Blair into the conversation because, Blair, you partner with LISC Hampton Roads. So there are chapters, Maurice, is that correct? Throughout the United States. And we have a chapter here, fairly new chapter here in the Hampton Roads area. And Blair, first of all, let's talk about Black Brand and tell us exactly what is Black Brand.
Yep. So as the region's Black Chamber of Commerce, Black Brand was really developed to kind of centralize Black entrepreneurship, to really provide a hub for innovation and business for the Black community. Our group got together and just took a look around and realized, number one, the prior Black chambers no longer existed, right? And number two, that there really was not a space that looked at development for Black businesses here in Hampton Roads. So we got underway in about the summer of 2016. And it has definitely been a journey as we look at, partnering with folks like LISC to be able to provide access to capital, putting on lots of education seminars, now well over 100 business education-focused events, and putting mentors and mentees together in the business space, and just wow, a lot of work, right, to do to ensure that that gap is closed because, as you all well know, the revenue of a Black-owned business is only around, the average revenue is around $62,000. It's just a little over 10% of that kind of national average. And so we're looking at how we can translate Black-owned businesses into scaled entities that actually, create jobs and so forth. So that's our mission. That's our work.
So, Blair, I know my audience, and I know that there are people out there who are going, well, why do I got to have a Black chamber? Why can't you just be a part of the chamber? Or at the Hispanic, we have a Hispanic chamber. There's a Filipino chamber. Explain to people why there is a specific focus on African-American business. Yes.
So the gap is really the reason. And in working closely with the Hampton Roads Chamber and having those conversations, those leaders admit that they have not focused on the business needs of the Black community. And so a Black chamber can do things like, place mentors in low-income high schools to begin conversations about entrepreneurship. A Black chamber can focus squarely on the Black community as it relates to business development. So there's definitely a need, and I think 2020 has exposed that need. So we're putting together programs like, why didn't I get PPP, or why couldn't I qualify for EIDL, to help business owners understand those critical accounting functions and so forth, to be able to better access capital and to better position themselves, generally speaking.
So, Maurice, let's talk about Project 10X. Exactly what is it that you want to accomplish with Project 10X?
Yeah, well, really just building off of Blair's point, Project 10X is an effort to attack and close the racial wealth, health, and opportunity gaps that we see all across the country. Building off of Blair's points, if you look at what's happening in our country today, white families have, on average, 10 times more wealth than Black families. 10 times. In fact, that's in the aggregate. If you disaggregated it and you went to markets around the country, you'd see that 10X is actually modest. I just saw a data point from the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. White families in Boston have a net worth of $247,000. Black families have a net worth of $8.
$8? Did you say $8?
I said 8, no zero. 8, no zeros. That's Boston. If you broke this down, you would see these data points. If you look across the country at life expectancy, we work in 37 markets. In every single market, including this market here in Hampton Roads, you can look at the census tracts that are occupied by Black and brown folks versus the census tracts where white folks live. The life expectancy gaps, and they all could be born at Centera Hospital, so it has nothing to do with access to medical care. The life expectancy gaps, 10, 20, 30 years difference, living 10 minutes apart. Broken down by race in place. You look at the country today, and what you'll find is a Black male, on average across the country, can expect in his lifetime, the data point says 1 in 3 of those Black males can expect to be incarcerated at some point in their lifetime based on America's current incarceration rate. The same rate for white is 1 in 17. So to Blair's point, we have real gaps that can be broken down by race and place. So what TEDx tries to do is to say, we know that there are solutions to actually close these gaps. Let's do these solutions in a comprehensive, bold, long-lasting way. So we've broken down 4 lanes of work that we think are the most powerful influences that can close those gaps. One is intergenerational wealth transmission. That's home ownership and small business ownership. So we're going to use capital to invest in more Black folks becoming homeowners, which is still the most powerful force for creating wealth in America today. By the way, the home ownership gap, the Black home ownership rate today is a little over 40%. The white home ownership rate today is a little over 70%. 30 points difference.
Yeah, I think I read in your materials that the number is lower now than it was in the 60s.
The lowest it's been in 50 years. Wow. So we've got that lane. We've got another lane that is devoted to access to financial services, credit repair, savings, insurance. The third lane is the wage gap, trying to use the money to invest in businesses that are providing living wage jobs for people of color with benefits. And then the fourth lane is the community asset that you need to be working well to produce wealth. And we broke it down into 5. Access to a high-speed broadband and digital literacy, access to education, and that's from 0 to 35. Access to health care, access to safety and justice, a safe environment, a just environment, and then lastly, the arts, leveraging the arts, whether it's theater or a small business that's in the art space to produce this wealth. So it's a billion-dollar effort, 10-year effort to invest in the most powerful levers of wealth and health and opportunity generation in this country, and to do so with intentionality to close the racial health, wealth, and opportunity gap. That's 10X in a nutshell.
Wow. So I know that as African Americans, we can truly understand what a game changer this would be for our communities, for our people and so forth. But I would imagine, Maurice, that sometimes with other businesses that you're hoping to get involved in this, that you would need to sell it from an economic perspective. Why is this good business sense to close this gap?
It's a game changer for America. So a recent data point for you. I saw a data point, and I think McKinsey and Company did this study that showed that if you can close this black-white racial wealth gap, this 10 times wealth gap that I just mentioned, you could add $1 to $1.5 trillion to America's GDP.
Wow.
To America's GDP. So this is actually about more than the black and brown communities. This is about how Hampton Roads can remain competitive within a global economy. And it's also about how the country can remain competitive in a global economy. This is, at the end of the day, this is what the country will need to do to continue to be the global force that it is in the political economy of the world. If we don't do this, we're going to find ourselves declining within the global economic sphere that we work in.
Wow. Blair, when you hear this, what does that do for you in terms of the work that you're trying to do with entrepreneurs on the ground? How do you see this being able to be manifested in real time?
Yeah, it's such an interesting point because I think that for too long, the disenfranchisement of the Black community has seemingly served, the larger or the white interest, right? And so when I'm reading the McKinsey report, which I'm so glad, that you brought that up, Maurice, and realize that a rising tide lifts every boat, I get excited. 2020 certainly hasn't been what any of us would have wanted in a lot of ways. But in certain other ways, the level of attention to what has taken place with our communities, the capital investment, right, as we're talking about, it makes me, I am thrilled in thinking about it. I just see, many more Black businesses surfacing, strong businesses surfacing, scalable businesses. I see our communities transforming in ways that may not have been possible prior to this point.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. We're talking about Project 10X. It's a bold $1 billion initiative to erase and to stop the gap, the racial inequity gap we have here in our country. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Maurice, what would you say to people who say, well, we've invested money before and we've put money in the community. What's going to make this any different from what's already been done?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. When the U.S., when World War II ended, it was clear to the country that we needed a strong Europe in order to have a strong U.S., that we needed a strong Europe, and that to have that strong Europe, we had to have a Marshall Plan, a bold, large-scale investment in rebuilding Europe in order for us to, frankly, have a buffer for the East, at that time, the Soviet Union. This is the same analogy. If the U.S. is going to be strong and bold and sustainable, we have to invest in a bold, huge way in the places in our country that are also underdeveloped, that we need to be stronger in order to actually thrive. And I would say the difference right now about this time is I think that you see now that this year, with the conversion of a health pandemic, the conversion of a recession, and a racial reckoning, that more people are awake to the fact that we still have unfinished business, that this is a country that went through slavery and Jim Crow and suppression of the vote and separate but equal and redlining. So to say that we actually did this and did it full scale is actually ahistorical. This country has been discriminating against race in place for the entirety of our journey. So the notion that we've actually had an all-out effort that was unmitigated by these other discriminatory practices is just not true. It's ahistorical. What I see this year, though, is more and more folks awake to the fact that we have more work to do in the American experiment with racial justice. I am naively optimistic to think this time could be different. This time we actually can have the equivalent of a Marshall Plan for the underinvested places and people in the U.S.
So when I was doing my research on this and finding the information, I ran across a video that you did, and this is kind of personal for you also, Maurice, isn't it?
No question. This is personal. I was reared by grandparents in a small town to the west of here, about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. My grandfather went to school for 6 years in a barn. And then because of his color, because we were at that time colored, my grandfather was born in 1914, he had to go to work. He had to go out to the woods and start cutting pulpwood and working at mills. My grandmother lived in town. She was close enough in town to walk to school, to the local colored school, and got a high school diploma. These were the most brilliant people I knew. They had all the talent that I've seen in anybody in my lifetime. What they didn't have was opportunity. And what this 10X is about is fighting for opportunity for people like my grandmother and grandfather who are still living in a place where we have more work to do. So, yeah, this is very personal.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Carl joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Carl. You're on the air.
Yes, hello. Thank you. I understand what the gentleman is trying to do, and I also hope that everybody treat everybody the same. Here, what I'm hearing, though, is a little bit tough for younger folks. So a lot of these things that are spoken about seem to have happened, did happen in the past. But if today, all students are getting the same education in the public school, and around Hampton Roads we have opportunities such as the shipyards and the military to go into to better yourselves. And I'm trying to figure out what the disparity is that the gentleman's talking about as far as incarceration, like what the blame is and putting it on. Is it you're saying that the crimes were not committed, or
okay,
because of these other things, the crimes?
Carl, I think I understand where you're going. So your position is that a lot of this disparity happened in the past and it's not happening now. And Maurice, I think, and Blair, I'd love to hear from both of you on that perspective. Is he right that this happened a long time ago and everything is equal today? Let me start with you, Blair, this time. Let me start with Blair.
It's interesting, particularly the point about mass incarceration, right? We have a thriving prison industrial complex that relies upon the fact that there is a cradle to prison pipeline. Even today, black male children are far more likely to be suspended, which translates into, very early entry into our criminal justice systems. That statistic about 1 in 3 black men likely entering the penal system, it's a now statistic, is what I would say. And so we are still dealing with the level of discrimination that Maurice has spoken about. And it is a function of, in part, a lack of access to opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Maurice, your response.
Yeah, well, first, I thank the gentleman for his response. So, look, there are a couple things to be said. One is that if you look at the history of, I mentioned that one of the areas we want to do work in is the intergenerational wealth piece. Mm-hmm. It's home ownership and small business ownership. So, in the words of Faulkner, the past is not irrelevant to today. In fact, it ain't even the past, right? We still have the impacts of what was done that prevented Black families from being homeowners today, because that wealth is passed down through generations, right? And so this is really about trying to invest in those things that this country has already shown can produce wealth over generations. Home ownership is one of those things. And yes, the home ownership rate today of Blacks can definitely be traced to historical redlining, deeds and covenants that said you will not allow Black folks to live in this community. Yes, those things that happened in the past still have impact today. So you can say yes to that easily, and American history is strewn with that. But even if you didn't have that, you still have the argument of, in this country, we're as strong as the most vulnerable people in places. And so it's in our interest to make sure we are identifying those people in places and making the investments necessary to give these folks in these places more opportunity. So you have both the historical argument and the argument that's in our self-interest for now and the future.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about Project 10X, a $1 billion initiative to ultimately eliminate systemic racism in housing, economic development, healthcare, and business ownership. My guests are Maurice Jones, President and CEO of the Local Initiatives Support Corporation, or LISC, and Blair Durham, co-founder and co-president of Black Brand, the Black Chamber of Commerce in Hampton Roads. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. Bill joins us from Williamsburg. Hi, Bill. You're on the air.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi.
I also despair about the disparity in net worth between white and Black households. But when I heard the figure of $8, like you, Barbara, I gasped. So I checked on the internet and got several estimates. But the Brookings Institution, as of 2/27/2020, has white net worth as $171,000 and Black as $17,500, which is indeed 10 times and terrible. But Black family net worth simply cannot be $8.
Maurice?
That $8 was Boston. So
that was the city of Boston.
Correct.
Yeah, he was talking not about the country.
The city of Boston alone.
Right.
But you're right. The reason why we call this 10X is for the figures that the gentleman's just quoting. It's a 10 times figure overall. What I was saying is if you disaggregated it and went to separate markets, you'd see that 10 times figure is actually too low. In Boston, it's much greater than that. That's the figure I was giving them. But the gentleman's right about the overall figure.
Okay, thanks so much for the call, Bill.
I'd hate to have somebody go out and quoting $8,000 or whatever it was.
Well, again, we were talking, it was $8 and
accurate.
In the city of Boston itself.
Yeah, and so go get the Federal Reserve report in Boston. You'll get it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the call, Bill. We appreciate it. So let's talk some specifics in terms of how, Maurice, you would choose people. How are you going to decide who is going to work on the ground to put this all in place? In other words, what's the next step after you raise all this money and start to distribute it? How will you make that decision on who's making the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why we need partners like Blair, because what LISC does is tries to aggregate the capital, and then our belief is the most powerful assets for opportunity are local. And so what we do is work with Blair, work with the Urban League, work with the community colleges, work with community-based organizations, and that is the way that we reach communities, places, residents, people to actually get the work done. And what LISC does is sets up local offices through which we build these relationships and partnerships so we can actually get the work done in the community. So we have across the country about 3,000 partners that we work through in order to get this capital to individuals. So we're starting, for example, a couple of places in Hampton Roads that will provide residents with three things: a coach to help with financial literacy training, a coach that also helps people with housing, transportation, and childcare issues, and then a coach that's going to help build their skills to get living wage jobs. Well, we're going to do that in partnership with the Urban League and then in partnership with the workforce services folks here. Those are the kinds of ways that we actually reach people is through local partnerships. We're a national organization, but we do all of our work locally. Thus, we opened the Hampton Roads office.
So I understand that one of the things you mentioned, financial literacy, and we also talk about putting more investment in African American banks. I read an article in the New York Times. I was stunned at the issues that African Americans have had in terms of banking, in terms of simply going into a bank to try to cash a check or deposit in an account and so forth. And there is documentation of many people who are questioned, who aren't believed that it's their account, even if they show ID, etc. Are Black banks something that is important to this initiative?
Absolutely. And so a big piece that we're about to tomorrow, actually, or maybe it's even today, we're going to close on, within 10X, we have something called the Black Economic Development Fund. It's money that we've raised to actually make deposits and loan capital available for Black banks, Black credit unions, and Black community development financial institutions. These financial institutions prioritize communities of color and people of color as their borrowers. That's their mission, right? Look at what's happening around the country. Another data point for you and your audience. If you look at the unbanked and the underbanked, meaning people who have no relationship with the bank or use predatory lending services, that percentage among Black households is 50%. The same percentage among white households is 20%. We need stronger, we need more financial institutions dedicated to serving communities of color. That's why we're going to make these investments in Black banks and Black credit.
Okay, Vernon joins us from Newport News. Hi, Vernon. You're on the air.
Hi, how you doing, Barbara?
All righty.
All right. My question was, how is this different, or is it similar to community investment banks or banking, and especially with what you were last talking about as far as creating banks and creating lending institutions in the communities?
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll let Maurice answer that. Yeah. Thanks, Vernon.
Sure. Well, you need community banks as well. But what we were just now talking about were what's commonly referred to as MDI, minority depository institutions, organizations that were started, honestly, in the early 20th century, some in the late 19th century, because mainstream financial institutions would not serve Black folks. Going back to an earlier comment that one of your earlier callers made, these are institutions who prioritize communities of color as the places that they will invest in. A community bank is for an entire community, which is good. You need community banks. What we're talking about now are stronger financial institutions that intentionally prioritize communities of color. We need more of those, and that's what this effort includes. It's not solely about that, but it includes that.
Includes that. So, Blair, as you work with African American businesses, what are some of the major challenges that they are facing, particularly in this pandemic time that we're in and in this racial unrest time, in terms of growing their business and being productive as an entrepreneur? What are some of the challenges?
It's a good question. And one of the things that comes to mind has to do with, again, going back to this McKinsey report, focusing on building supportive ecosystems for Black-owned businesses. So our business community generally pursues businesses in less lucrative sectors because of something that you raised earlier. Some of those challenges that they are facing right when they're ideating kind of prevents them from growing a big business or from even thinking about a larger business. So for that reason, they kind of tend to keep their business ideas small. They know they're not going to access capital. And so they're challenged right out of the gate in that regard. Looking at the struggles that they are facing in terms of the pandemic, they're really the same, and they're a function of that or a fundamental issue of just not necessarily having had their business set up properly out of the gate. So we know that right around 41% of Black-owned businesses have closed their doors for good during the pandemic. And so we're, again, the focus is with the entrepreneurial spirit, how do we help these people to develop new businesses that are a response to the pandemic? How do we help them to kind of get beyond wherever they are right now to creating something that works in 2020 and in 2021?
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Wanda joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Wanda. You're in the air.
Barbara, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good.
A very quick question for the partners there, and that is, how are you going to market all of these programs to the general African American community? Other than just by way of Urban League, how are you going to let African Americans know that these coaches for all these various opportunities of access and knowledge, how's the information going to get out to them? They're not just plugged into one radio station or one TV station.
Good question. Maurice, I'm going to let you handle that one. Thanks for the call, Wanda.
Well, for that very small segment that's not listening to your show, Barbara, we always use various ways that we do this. We're going to try to use every media outlet we have, but we also are going to be working with churches. We'll be working with CDCs, community development organizations. The schools. We will be talking to realtors. We'll be talking to black businesses. It'll be an aggressive, comprehensive marketing, education, outreach that we will be doing to try to make sure that everybody knows about the plans we have and the opportunities that we hope to be a part of trying to catalyze.
And how they can get involved in that information.
Definitely how they can get involved.
Blair, if somebody wants to know about the Black Chamber, how do they reach you?
Yeah, they can reach us at blackbrand.biz, BLACKBRAND.biz.
Okay.
And to Maurice's point, we've been very happy to partner to spread the news about the great work that LISC is doing. Right now, I know that there's the Virginia Beach Initiative providing support to business owners there. So we've been spreading the word through our radio show and other media outlets to make sure that folks know to apply. So, and even in thinking about the pandemic funds that were awarded through LISC. Wow, massive response in terms of applicants from what I hear, and I know that's due in large part to the partnerships that LISC creates to get the word out.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to let you go ahead and promote your radio show, too. Which is on WHOV.
Another outlet for sure. Black Wall Street Today, radio show and podcast focused on all things Black entrepreneurship. So a great place if you're looking to meet some new Black businesses or get some information about starting a business every Wednesday, 12 to 1, 88.1, or anywhere where you listen to podcasts.
And see, I would let you do that because you're on Wednesday and not Thursday. But...
I know, right? So we are not in the competitive space. Thank you, Barbara.
Sure. But I want to ask both of you because as I listen to the questions that we've received today, some of the questions, I hear a tinge of either there they go doing their own thing, or they're going to get more help, or, it doesn't sound positive to me in terms of this is an opportunity for the community to turn around and to do what a lot of people accuse us of not doing, which is to put our skin in the game and pull ourselves up so that everybody can rise. Am I off on that thought, Maurice? What do you think?
No, look, I will tell you that the overwhelming response that we have received regarding 10X has been enthusiastic. I think you certainly have folks who have some skepticism and who wonder why we're doing this. And I welcome those questions. I welcome that feedback because we can't really change anything in this country without dialogue, and it needs to be civil dialogue. So I welcome those. I think your callers have all been civil, and they've all asked reasonable questions and raised reasonable issues. My view is the more we have of that, the better, because the more chance we have to engage in a dialogue and hopefully, frankly, both of us walk away with a better understanding of another person's truth. The biggest thing we need right now in this country is compassion for one another and listening to one another. So I'm grateful that folks take the time to raise issues, whether it's supportive or whether it's constructive critique. My view is that all makes us better. So I welcome that, and I thank your audience for engaging.
And Blair, I saw you nodding your head.
No, I'm excited too. It just takes me back to my undergraduate work. I sat in on every course that was pertinent to the discussion of race for 4 years. I took the undergraduate courses, the graduate level courses, the independent studies, the teacher assistant pieces. I think the dialogue is absolutely productive. I'm happy to have it.
No. All right, I'm going to try to get one more call in because we're almost out of time. But Max joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Max. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for your panel. Just two aspects I would like for your panel to comment on. The first one is Black-owned businesses. I would just ask the group to, look at ways that we can make Black business more successful. My experience has been that a lot of times the Black-owned businesses don't have that front-end view from the business aspect to reach out to all audience. Sometimes their webpage may not be up, or your phone numbers or invoices are not looking very professional. So people want to, be able to have that aspect if they want to expand themselves outside of the Black community. And then the second area is, I'm hoping that you would, through this grant, that you look at that age demographic between 18 and 35 to really target that group, to look at how to build wealth, how to develop an individual retirement account, how to think long-term about health care and their needs, because I'm seeing that that group is not really thinking about those types of things. They're more thinking about the day-to-day living. So I really appreciate your comment and your time.
Thank you, Max. I appreciate that. Maurice, you want to answer him? We've got 3 minutes left.
Both great comments. So let me mention first on Black-owned businesses. What we're seeing is one of the things that businesses need to get off to a really stable and fruitful start is friends and family, right? That's where you get your first investments for. Well, guess what? if you're in a Black family where your friends and family are not wealthy at all, then the question is, where do you go, right, to get that strong start? So one of the things we hope to do with 10X is to actually provide some capital that would be the equivalent of a friends and family pool so that Black-led businesses can actually get off to a stronger start. So I appreciate that. With respect to this 18 to 35 build wealth, yes, absolutely. And that's why we're focusing on financial literacy coaching, wealth management coaching, building a credit history, trying to repair credit if we need to. Yes, those are all components of 10X that we hope to partner with places like Black Brand and others to be useful in this regard. So thank the caller for those that commentary.
Blair, we've got less than a minute. I'm going to give you an opportunity to give a final thought to our audience in terms of what we've been talking about.
Thanks, Barbara. This has been a wonderful conversation. Again, delighted to have it. I'm excited about the prospect of Black-owned businesses. I share the caller's concern about sort of the present state of things, but I recognize that, again, there's tremendous opportunity, and again, working with folks like Maurice and LISC to be able to get that capital, and not just the capital, but the wraparound support, the mentors, the coaches, the training to be able to bring those businesses up. So I'm excited again. Thanks.
And if people want to know about Black Brand, it's blackbrand.biz, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, fantastic. That is Blair Durham. She is the co-founder and the co-president of Black Brand, the Black Chamber of Commerce here in Hampton Roads. Maurice, you get the last minute, literally.
I am optimistic about what an effort like this at scale can do, both for communities of color and for all communities in the country. That's what this is about. We're as strong as our most vulnerable businesses, our most vulnerable people, our most vulnerable places. We make them stronger, we all become stronger. I'm looking forward to partnering with a lot of folks.
Absolutely. And if people want to know more, where do they go, Maurice, real quickly?
They go to LISC.org, www.lisc.org.
And that is LISC.org.
LISC.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. That is Maurice Jones, President and CEO of LISC. Thank you both so much, and we'll be right back.
I'm with Marcellus, and you all are checking out Another View. Don't go anywhere. Check us out.
And welcome back. Remember the excitement that accompanied bringing a newborn into the world? What does the future hold for this precious life? Will my child be a musician, a professional athlete, or president of the United States? Now imagine your dreams of this great future being turned upside down when you learn your child has special needs. Well, this happened to Mark and Dawn Lawrence not once, but twice. And they've written a book in hopes of helping other parents with special needs children maneuver through the challenges. The Lawrences recently spoke with our Lisa Godley about raising them special.
It was devastating, just devastating that I'm going to have to go a different path. This was supposed to be my little academic scholar, but also my little athlete. I had it all planned, the Olympics and the Super Bowl, the whole nine. But it was just coming to grips that I'm facing a new challenge, and my wife and I had to be all in.
Mark and Dawn Lawrence's journey as parents of a special needs child began in 1989 with the birth of their son,
Delivery
Mark.
Was such an event because the labor was non-progressive, and they checked for the number of centimeters that I've dilated. It's 1. 8 hours later, I'm still at 1. So now they're talking about a Schedule C. And so all of those things began to concern us because it wasn't cookie cutter. It was not following the path that we thought it would take. And so following that experience, we later found out that the possibility that he had swallowed some of the meconium and it would later show up as maybe some delays. We weren't sure.
Mark says it was one of their son's first teachers who was instrumental in helping them identify some of the different traits that were taking place.
Mark's development initially seemed fine, but it wasn't until, he was in preschool and couldn't focus and wouldn't respond to certain markers, that one of his teachers came to us and began to have some conversations, some very honest conversations.
Mark was diagnosed with Asperger's.
For me, being an educator, I was assessing all along, trying to see what he could do, what he couldn't do. So I just began to modify my teaching strategies at home. Every day I would read to him and teach him things.
And Mark was pretty high functioning, so his needs were not as profound as the second son, Micah.
Micah was diagnosed with autism.
Micah's change was almost like overnight. There are people who fiercely disagree and fight that, but I will always be one to say, look, I know, how my son, I remember him being in the back seat and he'd be humming and just percolating. And then after that final inoculation, he was the opposite. He just went numb and became a totally different person and cast us on a completely different journey.
The Lawrences consulted with Mark and Micah's teachers to develop individualized educational plans for their sons that included goals to work on.
In the beginning, because we were seeing developmental specialists and psychologists and psychiatrists and different ones, they recommended some assessments, and based on those assessments, they qualified for early enrollment, and they loved it. They enjoyed it. So from 3 years old, Micah was 3, Mark was about 4.5, 5, and they went from that time till 22. They both graduated from Chesapeake Public Schools.
And when they were young adults, Don discovered a grant that would help Mark and Micah get out into the community and make a difference as volunteers.
They would support churches by dusting and cleaning. They would do Meals on Wheels delivery. They shredded papers for certain realty agencies in the area. They bagged day-old breads and pastries from Panera and delivered to churches. And so they did these amazing assignments that the children loved.
Mark and Don have now chronicled their journey in a book they've titled Raising Them Special, and they offered a little advice to those of us who don't encounter people with special needs on a regular basis.
Just smile and be warm, be gracious, and there's a connection. There's just an unseen connection between the parents that, they know that this person identifies something special in my child.
I encourage individuals to speak to the caregiver and say, oh, how are you today? How is this young man doing today? Many times the caregiver say, oh, well, this is Micah, this is Mark, and, and well, how old are they? And what do they do during the day? So I'm always in a teaching mode because I recognize so many have not been taught proper protocols for dealing with this demographic.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And you can find Raising Them Special in paperback and the ebook on Amazon.com. This is the last live broadcast of Another View in 2020, and we are so happy you decided to spend this hour with us. If you'd like to hear this show again or share it with a friend, please visit our website. It's anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. We're on Facebook, so like us, and I'm on Twitter at Barbara Ham Lee. We'll be back on New Year's Eve with a Best of Another View special edition. But for now, we wish you and yours a very safe and blessed holiday season. Please remember something. The pandemic is not over yet. So wear your mask, stay socially distant, stay home if you can, and wash your hands frequently. We must still continue to contain the virus until we can all be vaccinated. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. On behalf of the Another View crew, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, everyone. We'll be back live with you on January 7th, 2021. Thank you so much for listening to Another View.
We're caroling through the night, and this Christmas